Good afternoon, all of you. I'm very happy to be able to moderate today's panel after Ashima Garima and Anuragji reached out to me and said that Tarun, you have this topic. It's a very topical topic that they have given me an opportunity to talk about, which also makes me happy because many times we do a lot of academic discussions, but today are the times when after what you saw in Afghanistan, a lot of drugs have started coming to this country. And I would like to give you a factoid that you would all know 85 to 87% of all drugs originate in Afghanistan. It has become a poppy cultivation, in a sense, hub of the world. It is a big revenue generator for that country. And of course, when foreign armies occupy any area, there are strong underhand networks that build because money can corrupt even the best and the most honest, as we have seen. Taking on from that little nugget that I shared with you, the topic is crackdown on contraband substances, which of course, as we all know in common language, are drugs. The first drug is what you consume to get better, and the second is what you consume to get high. So we are discussing the latter today. And I have an eminent panel with me, most of all three of whom I know well as eminent and very well respected lawyers in the country. May I introduce you to Senior Advocate G.V. Rao. So welcome to today's discussion. A pleasure to have you. I have with me Senior Advocate Pramod Dubey. Mr. Dubey, welcome on this discussion. I have with me Sridhar Pottaraju, a lawyer at the Supreme Court of India. Welcome, Sridhar. We will start with a round of opening comments on this issue. May I request Senior Advocate Rao to open this discussion and explain to the whole audience here contraband substances and challenge for the Indian legal system as you have seen in the past 15-20 years, of course with the Afghanistan angle that we see emerging of late.
Yeah, good afternoon everyone. As luck would have it, I started my career with the Attorney General's office way back in '86. And that was the year when the Narcotic Control Bureau was actually set up. And so within a couple of years, by '87, '88, we were getting cases which the Narcotic Control Bureau was prosecuting. So the gentleman called B.V. Kumar, who was the DRI chief, and he set up the Narcotic Control Bureau. And by that time, the drug menace had become serious. And as you know, there are so many international conventions which deal with drugs, their use, prohibition, the supply, and all of these. So we are a signatory to those conventions, and therefore we have set up our own enactment in the form of the Narcotic the Substances Act. So therefore, the ramifications of drugs and the connection with money laundering is very intrinsic. They both are go hand in hand. And as you have heard, Tarun Nangia has just cautioned us and has told us about what has happened in Afghanistan. The entire is called the Golden Triangle. That is Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan. These areas, there are the various kinds of drugs are grown. They are processed. So you get, substances which are made out of the natural products. You have processed products, all of these. And these have a tremendous impact on the economy, on the well-being of youngsters, in colleges, in Punjab. I don't know if some of you have seen a movie called Udta Punjab. It talks about the drug problem. So therefore, it's a huge menace, and it is very intrinsically connected in a very big way with money laundering as well. And I will show that to you as we go on. Recently, 3,000 kgs of heroin was confiscated in Mumbai ports, which is 21,000 crores on the market.
I think it was not in Mumbai, but
it
Gujarat.
Was Gujarat, I'm sorry. In Gujarat, in the Mundra, which is probably Gujarat port, yeah, off the Mumbai coast. and therefore you can imagine the kind of impact it will have, because drug addiction is a very, very serious matter, and they are so addictive. And on one use of a particular drug, you could be hooked to life. And therefore it could destroy complete lives, careers, etc. So the government, the responsible people in the society, they're all very concerned about ensuring that this thing is being tackled well.
Oh, now I'll take it to Mr. Dubey. I know you as a lawyer who have argued many money laundering matters, be it for the Unsels or Augusta Westland, which we all know was a very famous choker scam, in which, of course, laundering payments were talked about. There is a latest Avantha group matters that you are arguing, and Bhushan Steel. So you understand this concept very well of money laundering. How much of prevalence of money laundering do you see in the drug running business in India when these are imported in India? Payments, they be made legally, or do you think it only happens through the Hawala or the laundering network?
See, Arun, you have raised the issue at the inception. First, I will thank you and the Business Legal World providing me the opportunity to address all of you. You have mentioned Afghanistan, the 80%, and Mr. Rao, the senior advocate, has mentioned that's a golden triangle. The golden triangle is not known as the Afghanistan, Pakistan. The golden triangle is the Thailand, Laos, and the Myanmar. So and golden crescent is called the Pakistan and Iran and Afghanistan. So these all are the borders country. So you have the two ways to import the drugs, one from the Pakistan, Afghanistan side, and they have illegal production of all these psychotropic substance in the Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, and Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand. So northeastern countries, states, that's the seven sister states, and the border country like Punjab and the Kashmir, Gujarat, they are mostly involved in the import of these drugs. But the drugs and the money laundering has a great nexus amongst them. And now it has been mentioned that India was the party to the convention. There were three conventions mostly. That was in 1961, 70, and then 80. So 1985, the NDPS Act came into the picture, and the stringent conditions were enacted in the law, and thereafter the legislature enacted the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So, and NDPS was brought in a scheduled offense, because in the PMLA Act you cannot prosecute the person unless and until it is scheduled offense in the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So it came subsequently, not in the initial stage. So the both has the very interconnected, and you have rightly asked this question, ki Hawala and so there is a system, the people, what they do, they export the things in the name of the software and so many things, and they legalize the tainted money and the money which was being generated through this import of the narcotic substance like the heroin and the puppies, all the things. And this is affecting the young generation. This is the problem with this country. And we have already seen in the Sushant Singh Rajput case, that's the Riya Chakravarti's matter. We are facing with the Aryan Khan matter, the Shahrukh Khan's sons. But this is, we are not happy with all these things, because this is the publicity-based matter, I would say. You have not till date traced out the real supplier. And we have the experience of the NDPS cases where the cases are based on the secret information. So if you have the intelligence with you, you have the every enforcement agency, so you are basically catching the person who are user, and you are using all these narcotic substance, but you are not going to the real source. So the main problem as on date is the real source, and you cannot do the case only for the publicity, Like in the Aryan Khan matter, what has happened? The way with the due respect to the court, the session court, they have defined the conscious position. One person has kept the narcotic substance in his shoes, and he has the knowledge without user. You don't have any evidence whether he used or not, and you came to the conclusion that no, both were in the conscious position because he was the son of the celebrity. So this is also the travesty. So we don't know where we are moving. One side we are going to check all these things, the money laundering things, and other sides we are not doing, our enforcement agency is not going in the right way.
Mr. Dubey, you have raised a very important point that you have to differentiate a user from a person who actually trades in this drug. And we are given to believe that it's a business in billions of dollars. This business is not, and we may be aware today that drug menace goes across so many colleges across the country. It's a common phenomena. So what you said that you crack down on the suppliers, the users at best needs rehabilitation. Is it what you think?
Of course, they need the rehabilitation. You do the counseling session, but what you are doing, you are ruining their career by doing the publicity. You are not going to the source of the origination. You have to catch the person. Because you see, in the cruise there were as many as 200 people, and you are catching the celebrity's son, and every time you are getting the publicity, everyone knows the Bombay and the NCR Delhi, they are the hubs for the supply of the narcotic substance. So why you are not catching the main culprits? Like in the wildlife, everyone knows the Majnu ka Tila in Delhi is the source to supply all the wildlife articles. So like you have all the information, you have created the NCB for only this purpose. And you see what happened to the Riya Chakravarti's matter. We are still asking ourselves who are the main supplier? Where is the chain? Where is the origination? How it came to India? Where is your investigation? So this is the travesty. We are only doing the publicity, gaining the public perception, getting the debate, and praising ourselves, the enforcement agency.
You've raised a very important issue, and I'll take this discussion to Advocate Sridhar Pottaraju. In your view, the way law enforcement agencies tackle the drug menace, and what our panel, Senior Advocate Pramod Dubey raised, that you have to trace out people who are managing to procure this in bulk and sell it to all the youngsters in India. It will also involve an element of money laundering, because I think if so much of drugs comes from Afghanistan or some other places, can you make payments via the legal network, or do you think this is all laundering? Because then it's a double problem. A laundering network will also be a very powerful network with a lot of important people involved, and the drug network cannot do without some patronage somewhere of administration. Can you decode this for all of us?
See, thank you Business World for having me here. Thank you Tarun to raise this specific question. I mean, as I see, contraband substances and money laundering are two sides of the same coin, because contraband substances cannot exist legally. That is by definition what is contraband. Now the third dimension to this is terror finance. When you mention Afghanistan, the controlled areas which are actually exporting drugs are all in the hands of militia, which are not regulated by any international law or conventions. So therefore the channels of money movement backward into their economy will necessarily have to be illegal channels, which we would refer to as money laundering or hawala, as they may be referred to. So money laundering is what? Primarily, you get money from an illicit activity or an illegal crime, and the proceeds of crime are actually laundered and then camouflaged and packaged to depict as if it is a legitimate business transaction, and then the money is remitted through the regular banking channels or the regular financial institutions, or by handing over certain transactional values in cash or in kind in different locations globally, and these are well-entrenched networks which are existing parallel to your established money exchanges which you find across the globe, which are legalized by the respective central banks of the countries. Now, the other aspect that I would like to speak about in the opening is that we are talking about public health here. We are talking about the economic health of the nation. We are talking about the public health as a consequence of consumption of drugs. Now, the major consumers of drugs are adolescents and young adults who get introduced to these at a very nascent age. I mean, I've grown up in Hyderabad and then I moved to Delhi in '94. The first refrain I was actually given by all well-wishers, friends, when I used to visit home in Hyderabad is, oh, Delhi, a lot of drugs. So, and I had to tell them, boss, they don't force you to have drugs. It's your conscious choice. So therefore, I mean, I choose to be a teetotaler, though I've been living in Delhi for 27 years. Now, it's a conscious personal choice, is what I had to explain, because I've seen people doing it around. And then I wouldn't know the difference, because, I mean, I'm not into it. And then I'm reminded of a particular phrase which says that you won't have a desire about a thing which you've not seen, experienced, or tasted, or heard about. So I choose to not have that desire, because I refrained from even entertaining any conversations regarding them, and therefore probably I'm not excluded from certain social events or social peer groups. But that's the price you pay to retain your sanity and health as a citizen. That's what my refrain is. But of course, money laundering is the other side of drug trade. That goes without saying.
Point well taken. In fact, am I audible? Am I audible? Oh. Mr. Rao, 2 points. There was a talk in this country a few years ago that money laundering money is then funded for terror activities. Geopolitics and geopolitical reality of India is it is surrounded by countries with whom, say, on the west of India, we don't have good relations, the Pakistan-Afghanistan network. The second point is that this drug money can fund its way to things like Taliban, who will use it against India. Are our agencies empowered enough to crack down on these international networks, or at the agency front itself we are inadequate, so we see small, in a sense, seizures, but not the big ticket. We are not going after international networks and cracking them down, because we may not realize that this money is coming back to haunt us in the form of terrorists in Kashmir.
Very good question, Tarun. Now, first, let's address the issue of the finances that are the laundering actually that is going on, the finances that obviously anybody who pays for the drugs here, that money has to go to the supplier, and they are the enemy countries for all practical purposes. So that has to be tackled by our diplomatic channels in the international fora, where there is Interpol, there is other terrorist, anti-terrorist organizations which within the UN systems which deal with it, and we have to deal with tackling those financial transactions, etc., to ensure that they don't enter the normal banking channels, etc., and they are they are unable to do so. The second point is that how do we see it as a financing terror, etc. Now, way back in the 80s and the 90s, when I was with the Attorney General's office and the Solicitor General's office, when we were going and opposing the bail applications, etc., and other proceedings in Mumbai, etc., with respect to the drug traffickers. Mr. B.V. Kumar, who set up the Narcotic Control Bureau, wrote a book. He borrowed some books from me, a very young person. And in that book, please note that name, you may look for it, but maybe the copies or not, it's a chart. And let me tell you, I must read this chart for you while I try to hold this. It's called, that's how the chart looks, it's in the book. And it connects everything, money laundering, terror finance, drugs, etc. It's called Model Showing Nexus Between Organized Crime, economic crime, drug trafficking, terrorist activity, and money laundering. I'm talking about the early 90s when he wrote this book. Now, profits generated from drug trafficking go into tax havens. Then from tax havens, they are money laundered. The laundering money goes into shell companies. From shell companies, it goes into legitimate businesses. From legitimate businesses, it goes into organized crime. From organized crime, again, it goes back into the tax havens. And then from there, it goes into developing lobbies in the government. Then it goes into financing the drug trade, and then to terrorism. So this whole, and also our fraternity lawyers and chartered accountants, etc., are not left behind. They also become a part of it, and the whole system gets into the clutches.
May I tell you, Ram Jethmalani, once I was interviewing him in 2008, and I was asking about the drug lords that he has defended. He said, whenever I see a crook with fat money bags with him, I like to relieve him of his money.
His burden.
Because that's the least I can do in the interest, that I should relieve him of his money. He's made enough illegally. So if I relieve him of his money,
there will be less crime. Yeah, well, I was very close to Mr. Jethmalani himself, a great lawyer. We can talk endlessly about Mr. Jethmalani. But now this chart here will show this huge nexus that goes into the legitimate businesses as well. And it finances terrorism and it finances the drug trade. So therefore, this is an unholy nexus. The moment a foreign entity or a group of people or the Taliban or whoever is doing that, the whole plan is to wreck the country economically, wreck the youth from their energies, and damn every aspect.
You made a good point. I'll take it to Mr. Dubey. This point, Mr. Dubey, you made a very interesting point that you can prosecute the consumers, all well and good, but you should go after the network. Are our agencies coordinating, say, between the NDPS Act, the Narcotics Control Bureau, and say the Enforcement Directorate to go after these networks? Do you see that effort happening on part of the agencies?
Tarun, really speaking, we have the good enforcement agency in our country, like the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI. We have the Enforcement Directorate, we have the SEBI, we have also constituted recent after the Parliament attack, the NIA. But the beauty of all these agencies, they have the intersect competition among them. I would say that there is no proper coordinations. They are lacking with the coordinations, and they are trying to prove themselves that they are the best agency. Like let us take the example of CBI and the Enforcement Directorate. You will find so many cases like I don't want to name the person, but his case was going on with the CBI as well as the Enforcement Directorate. So he had applied for the anticipatory bail in Delhi High Court, and we were representing him. The moment his anticipatory bail got dismissed, so both the agency woke up and they tried their best ki who is going to arrest him first, to take the credit ki no, we have arrested the gentleman and the high-flying person of this country. So there is a lack of coordination. As on date, if the matter is being investigated, scheduled offences are being investigated by the CBI or Economic Offences Wing, the Enforcement Directorate will first call the person and get the arrest done to show that, we are doing the arrest, we are attaching the property. And if even it is being investigated by NIA, so there is an intersect competition between NIA and a special cell, Delhi Police, the encounter cell of the other states. So there is a lack of coordinations. And if they work together with the coordinations, they have a strong intelligence agency and they would be able to catch the real person and catch the big fish So you required the proper coordination amongst the enforcement agency.
You have raised an important point that our agencies work in silos. Each is hiding what they are doing so that the other will not take the credit.
And one thing I would also like to point out here, if you go to the CBI, so you'll find the two types of the person who are working the CBI. One, they have been recruited directly through the UPSC in the CBI. Other are the on the deputation or they are the hiring rank like the joint director and above, that's the IPS officers. So they have inter se ego problems and they don't recognize one wing does not recognize the another wing. Like enforcement directorate, you have seen whosoever is becoming the directorate enforcement, he will promote the officer from his own cadre. Like when Mr. Karnail Singh was the enforcement directorate, so he brought all the officers from the Delhi police. And Mr. Sanjay Singh Misra has taken over as a directorate enforcement. So he replaced all the police officers who were from the Delhi police and he brought the IRS officers from the income tax department. So this is the, I don't know why the government is encouraging all these things, and the central government should be cognizant of the ministry, especially the finance minister and the revenue secretary should do all the things. There should not be pick and choose of the officer as per the choice of the enforcement directorate or the director CBI or the NIA. Whosoever is coming, they are bringing their people and they are doing all the things. So they don't have the faith in the cadre people. And this is the basic travesty in the investigating agency, and enforcement agency is not going to the real goal. And Tarun, you can, as it has been pointed out by Mr. Rao, my colleague, the act came, all these things, you can put as many as number of stringent condition, you can put twin condition, you can do so many things, you can bring so many laws. But bringing the law is not the solution of the crime. Enforcement of the law in the right direction, with the right investigation is the true solution.
You've raised important point in your own wisdom and experience that we have the law, but coordination and working in silos is causing problems.
And enforcement is not the satisfactory.
I will extend this point to Learned Advocate Senior Sridhar Pottaraju. Can you extend this point and share your experiences that agencies working in silos and implementation of the law with regards to money laundering and contraband?
See, as far as the government agencies are concerned, they are no different from any other government departments that we've had for the past 70 odd years of our independence. So we have a problem within the administrative setup where the primary focus is on the individual's success and failure and ACR-driven performance, whereas the performance should be evaluated for the team as a whole, and then probably the results will be there. I mean, we cannot evaluate an individual and then ignore the team, because all these institutions need to work as a team. Now, talking about money laundering and then the other investigating agencies, the entire administrative setup under the money laundering is with the Enforcement Directorate. So they administer the PMLA Act. Now, when it comes to NDPS, it is an independent enactment, and there the central government and state government can authorize people to officers, or rather someone who's not in the rank of peon and above. That is all that the statute mandates. So therefore, they can actually conduct search seizure after getting the necessary approvals or recording the reasons to believe that there is certain contraband which is available and needs to be seized, and then the persons need to be taken into custody. Now, unless we have a grid of information, like what we are now developing to tackle terrorism across the country, the recent example which comes to my memory of coordination, of a very positive coordination amongst different agencies of different states, was where the Hyderabad ATS team detected certain presence of terrorists in UP. And that grid shared the information, which was a live information, which lead to a action on ground in Lucknow or somewhere in UP, with the UP ATS, and then a coordination was visible, and then success was achieved. So therefore, we need to have an information data grid which actually works live, and then the information is for national security or for the social security of the country. It is not a personal or an institutional proprietary information. So therefore, the acceptance and the realization within these organizations is very critical. In their training modules, probably they need to introduce this. Otherwise, what happens is that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand does, and then the charge sheet in one case can actually defeat the charge sheet in the other case.
That's a very beautiful explanation.
Isn't it?
So, as friends, you could all see this was an interesting discussion, but we veered towards the side of certain defects in coordination between the agencies themselves. We could go on discussing, but there is a paucity of time. So, I would like to end this panel by thanking Senior Advocate Rao, Senior Advocate Pramod Dubey, Sridhar Pottaraju, Advocate at Supreme Court. Thank you, all of you, for sparing time and joining us. And I would also like to thank the team from BW Legal and Business World, Garima Ahuja, Ashima Ori, and Dr. Anurag Batra for setting up this wonderful event and such important topics that we are getting to discuss today. And thank you for inviting me on the panel. Thank you. Thank you, all of you.